Welcome to Upon Further Review, a 21st Sports production as we go over the Thursday night game between the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs, as it's going to be played September 17th, 2015 in Kansas City. We're just going to go over some numbers and give our analysis for this game. And really, so far, all we have is 1 week to look back to. So they've each played one game so far. Of course, Kansas City went to Houston and they beat the Texans last week 27-20. Of course, the game wasn't quite as close as that, as Houston actually put up 11 points in the fourth quarter, as it was 27-9 for the majority of the game. Kansas City had scored all their points at halftime, so Kansas City was in control in that game against a really tough Houston defense. And let's go over some of the numbers for that game. Alex Smith, 22 for 33, 243 yards passing at 3 touchdowns. So Alex Smith was very productive last week against a really tough, staunch Houston defense that happens to have the consensus number one defensive player in the league in J.J. Watt rushing the passer. So even with the pressure from J.J., Smith still 22 for 33, an excellent completion percentage. I think that's about 66%, I believe, just off the top of my head math. But 3 touchdowns, also very impressive. Of course, 2 of those touchdowns went to Travis Kelce, who was running around in the secondary scot-free. There wasn't anybody even guarding him. You know, he didn't have any coverage on this big tight end who really anybody who's been paying attention knows that Travis Kelce can catch the ball. So I don't know why they were just letting him run free. Jamal Charles, not such a big game. That's where really the Texans defense did pretty good against the run. They only let Charles get 57 yards on the ground off of 16 carries. He did, however, add another 46 in receptions, since he had 5 receptions, one of which was a touchdown. So that brought him over the 100-yard mark on the game. So he had 103 total yards in the game. Kelce, by the way, 106 total yards in the 2 touchdowns he had. He did leave the game early, Kelce, that is, due to injury, but he looks ready to go for this game here, even with the short week. You know, so you look at the kicker, Carlos Santos, 2 for 3 on the field goals, 3 for 3 on the extra points. So he didn't miss the 1 field goal, but those 3 extra points, I mean, those are essentially 33-yard field goals, even though you just get 1 point. The defense for Kansas City was looking pretty good. They got a couple of sacks, Justin Houston and Jay Howard. And then Peters got an interception. Houston was in such disarray that they were switching up their quarterbacks. They were playing musical chairs behind center, which is always going to be a recipe for disaster. So those are the numbers from that game. And when we look at the Denver game last week and how they were performing, they had Baltimore come into Mile High, and they defeated the Ravens 13. Well, the Ravens had 13, the Broncos had 19. They beat them by 6 points, 19-13. There was no offensive touchdowns in that game. It was all defense. So it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. Is Denver, you know, they do have a very tough defense. Kansas City's defense was shining last week as well. They get after the ball. They've got a lot of really good players. So it should be a defensive battle. Be interesting to see, you know, how things look on the scoreboard. But let's look at the Denver and Baltimore game just to see how Peyton performed against the Ravens defense. Try to give us some idea how he might perform against Kansas City's defense. Peyton was 24 for 40, so he threw the ball 40 times. So apparently he's got strength in his arm, but the accuracy not so much. I don't know what is going on with Peyton. I'm not a doctor, but something's going on. Like I said, I previously said I thought maybe it was his arm, maybe it's his shoulder, maybe the neck. You know, that's the whole thing, like from that previous injury, like the neck's connected to the shoulder to the arm. And, you know, a lot of people I hear blaming it on the new system, but I'm not sure how a new system makes you less accurate. Of course, the fact that Peyton was, lining up under center a lot more in this Kubiak offense, as, you know, previously the last, couple runs they had, when John Fox was the coach, and then even Del Rio had to take over there because of medical issues with Fox. But they had him back, in the gun. So Peyton Manning was not lining up under center, which is better for Peyton. It gives him, a better view of the field. It gives him that space between the pass rush to where once he gets the ball, even with the pass rush coming at him, he has the time to just get the ball off. He's made his read. Whereas when you're under center, having to take that, 3-step, 5-step drop, now the pass rush has got a better shot at coming at you. The difference, though, why you would line up under center would be more for formations with two backs and, with dual tight end sets and things like that. You can still do that out of the gun, but, that's just the offense that Kubiak runs. And, 24 for 40, only 175 passing yards for Peyton. No touchdowns, except for the pick six that went back the other way as Jimmy Smith picked him off. Just one interception, though, not incredibly horrendous. It's not like he threw 4 interceptions or anything, but on the ground, the Broncos were struggling too against Baltimore's defense. And this is a defense that did not have a totally nada up front. They still got plenty of players on the Ravens defense, no doubt about that, but you would have expected them to be a little bit weaker against the run, having missed their big run stopper up in the trenches, but they had no problem shutting down the running game. C.J. Anderson, only 29 yards off of 12 carries. He had another 19 yards off of 4 receptions. Hillman was the leading rusher for the Broncos with 41 yards off 12 carries, neither of which really spectacular performances. As out of those 21 carries, they only got 7, or out of the 24 carries between the two, they only got 70 yards. And then, Emmanuel Sanders, 8 receptions, 65 yards, not really anything, overwhelming there. He did get his catches, but not much yards. As every time it seemed that Sanders was catching the ball, the defender was right there to tackle him. So it was like Peyton wasn't really throwing his guys open. He wasn't giving them the ball in stride. He was just, fitting it in there occasionally, and a lot of times missing a lot of throws. Like, he was not looking too good. Of course, in the face of that, Ravens pass rush, especially Terrell Suggs, although he did end up getting injured in that game. But, Demetrius Thomas, he's, one of the top receivers. He had 7 receptions, but only 60 yards. The real bright spot for the Broncos in that game was their kicker, as McManus had 4 for 4 from field goals and 1 for 1 in extra points. So he was perfect on the day. He was handling those long field goals. I believe he had a pair of 50-yarders, like a 57 to 56-yarder, if memory serves me correct. And then, the defense, though, was really the other bright spot. The kicker and the defense for Denver looked really good in the game. Their defense had a couple of sacks. Brandon Marshall was all over the field. He had a sack. DeMarcus Ware had a sack as well. Hakeem Talib had that pick six that, virtually won the game as it put him ahead. And then the other interception really sealed the victory as Darian Stewart came up with a huge pickoff at the end of the game. Very clutch on defense. So you see Denver was struggling on offense at home, and now they've got to go on the road. Of course, their defense was looking good, and defense usually does travel well. Where on the other hand, you got KC, who was looking dominant on the road against the tough defense in Houston. But now they're going to be at home against the tough defense in Denver. So it'll be interesting. Whereas it's kind of interesting that, Houston, the way they performed, actually, Houston was performing better on offense than Denver did. But then you don't know if that's something to do with Kansas City, and are they going to allow a similar performance from Peyton as they did from the 2 quarterbacks combined from Houston and Mallett and Hoyer. So we look at the passing yards allowed by both defenses. Denver was number 1 in the NFL in passing yards allowed, with only allowing 100 passing yards. Kansas City was 26th in the league with 298 combined passing yards allowed in that game between the 2 quarterbacks. Of course, like I said, this is just after 1 week, so being ranked number 1 is good and all, but it's only 1 game under their belt. And Kansas City being ranked 26th in yards allowed through the air, well, it's just the 1 game. And a lot of those yards came once Houston was playing catch-up in the second half. At that point, the game was pretty well in hand. KC had a huge lead. They'd already put 27 points on the scoreboard in the first half, so Houston was forced to just pass. KC at this point is going to be playing a little bit more lax on their defense because they're pretty much just like trying to let the clock run out, not really, getting after them as they were in the first half as they just shut them down. So especially in that fourth quarter where the Texans kind of, it's like garbage time at that point, and they add on the yards and they get their points. But really, KC looked a lot more dominant than some of the numbers bear out because of, fourth quarter padding of the stats. When we look at even points allowed, both teams, they said they were pretty good on the points allowed. Denver only allowing 13 points, which makes them 5th in the NFL after 1 week. And Kansas City allowed 20, and that makes them 12th. Of course, if you take away that 11 fourth quarter points, it's only 9 points they allowed until the end of the game, Of course, those points do count. They are there. It's not just because it's garbage time doesn't mean that they don't go on the stat sheet. They still go on the stat sheet regardless. In rushing yards allowed, Denver was very stout, only allowing 73 yards on the ground, and Kansas City only allowing 98 yards on the ground. Overall, that would put Denver at 8th and KC at 17th against the run. And we, in terms of their offense, points gained, Kansas City 11th by scoring 27, Denver 22nd, scoring 19. So KC put up 27 points, Denver put up 19. Of course, they did not put up one touchdown with their offense. The one, the touchdown they scored was Aqib Talib's pick 6, and then the 4 field goals by McManus. And so then, we look at the rushing yards gained by both teams. Both teams are struggling to get their rushing game going. KC just 97 yards on the ground. Denver 69 yards on the ground last week. KC was 17th overall, and Denver 27th overall. And then we look at their passing yards that they had gained in week 1. KC 233, Denver 150. That puts KC at 13th in the league at this point, and Denver 31st in passing yards gained in the NFL after 1 week of play. It's just 1 week of play, though. How much does that really going to bear out overall? We'll see. Basically, the way I break this down is that in Kansas City, I like the Chiefs. I like their defense. Their defense is looking really good. They made some good improvements to their offense in the offseason, especially adding Jeremy Maclin. I believe that opened up Travis Kelce. That's part of why he was running through the second level of the defense just scot-free. Like, he comes off the line now, he's running through the linebacker core, but there is no linebacking core there to cover him. They're either rushing the passer or they're somewhere else. Whereas, when they're double covering Maclin, Kelsey's just running all over the place. Now, at this point, this week, if Denver decides to show more attention to Kelsey, they're going to have to show more attention than Houston did for sure, or else he's going to get in the end zone another couple times. But even any attention they're showing to him, that means that they have to take a guy from somewhere else, and which will then lead Maclin potentially to see some one-on-one. Alex Smith was very accurate in that game, 22 for 33, and that shows Alex Smith is an underrated quarterback. He's a guy, he doesn't make mistakes. He might not put up the big yards like a lot of guys, but 3 touchdowns and throwing for 66% completion percentage. He does that in this game, and the way the KC defense is playing, they should have no problem. Especially that the Kansas City defense is going to get after Peyton. Justin Houston, one of the best pass rushers in the game, and he's surrounded by a bunch of great defensive players on all levels of that Kansas City defense. They can all get after the quarterback, and their corners can cover. They are an excellent team. So it's going to be a really tough game for Peyton. It's going to go a long way towards showing where is he really at. If he can put up a good performance against this D, then we know, well, maybe we're calling for the end of his career too soon. But I will not be surprised to see Kansas City dominant on the defensive side of the ball against the Denver offense. Of course, on the other side, Denver's defense is really strong. But if they're on the field the whole game, and especially, with the weapons that Kansas City has, they should be able to score, unlike Baltimore. Of Of course, Baltimore was also, a new system with Tressman as their offensive coordinator. I think that had to do with it too. They weren't really committed to the run against Denver, whereas I believe Kansas City should be more committed. They have a more balanced attack, and I think that will definitely, help their offense to get into the end zone, put up enough points to win this one. By all likelihood, this does, on paper look like it's going to be a defensive battle for sure, especially with these two defenses going at it. So it'll be interesting to see. We might have a low-scoring game. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see something like 17-10. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised to see if KC just kind of runs away with this one. They have the potential with that offense to put up plenty of points. Like I said, this one could get ugly, could turn into a blowout. Of course, the division rivalry game, these teams are too familiar with each other. They play each other 2 times a year, every year, year in, year out, at least twice a year, sometimes 3. They meet in the playoffs. But with that familiarity, it makes it tough to really blow out another team that you're so familiar with. Usually you're going to see a tighter game. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised to see a more low-scoring defensive battle. But like I said, the potential lies there for KC to blow it out. I'll be shocked if Denver can win this game, and I'll be shocked if they win it running away with it. That would really shock me. More likely what I see happening is a low-scoring defensive battle with the potential of KC opening it up and running away with it. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day, and have a great weekend, and enjoy all the sports.